I got that right, Susan? Is that how you read the research?
Yeah, I think...
No.
Maybe.
Said in the voice of no.
Yeah, that's very true. What's from the trolley?
I've picked a very lovely IPA called Destination Mars from Bristol Beer Factory, 4.2%, and it's got Idaho 7 hops in, which are quite tropical, but still very classic, hoppy. Nice.
Excellent. Does sound very good. Thank you. We'll have one for later.
Yeah.
Today's confession comes from Sinbad. Names have been changed. Father Simon, here is my confession. I've changed names and have not given the exact locations for obvious reasons, which will become clear. Back in 1984, I was 13 years old, and my family, mum, dad, and my younger sister, had just moved from the northeast of the country to a large town in the East Midlands due to my dad's company relocating. We'd moved into a new estate, which was still in the process of being completed. So all the other families were new to the area too. I was keen to make friends, as we'd moved around 200 miles from anyone I knew. My sister seemed to have no trouble making friends at all, as there were lots of girls around her age and she was very outgoing, so made new friends easily. I, however, was shy and would blush at the slightest thing, so I found it much harder to meet and make new friends. One day I was in the house and there was a knock on the door, which I answered, and it was a boy who looked to be around my age, and he stood with his hands behind his back and his chest all stuck out. I was excited. I thought maybe he lived nearby, knew I lived here and was going to see if I wanted to hang out. But no, he asked if my sister was in. So I shouted up to her room for her to come down, and I stood at the door hoping for a conversation to start, which it did. However, it was all a bit strange. Instead of exchanging names and talking about stuff that boys did at that age, it was more like being with the careers advisor. He asked me what my plans were when I left school.
Wow.
Which, like most 13-year-olds, I didn't have a clue.
No.
Yeah.
Which I told him, and he began to laugh at me and started to tell me that I won't get anywhere in life. He then told me that he was in the Sea Cadets, and as soon as he was old enough, he would join the Navy and have a fantastic career. He then continued to tell me how my life would lead to nothing, and his would be fantastic.
Wow.
At last, my sister came to the door and went outside with him. I went back in the house a little shell-shocked, thinking to myself, well, what just happened there? Anyway, he obviously took a disliking to me, as every time our paths crossed, he would stand there with his hands behind his back and his chest puffed out, like they do on TV when a soldier is told to stand at ease, and continued to tell me what a loser I was and how bright his future was going to be. Maybe he was doing this to me because he wanted to impress my sister or something. Anyway, one day I was going out of the house, and he was stood there and proceeded without invitation to tell me at Sea Cadets he'd been commended or something like that, and I just walked on. So this was the beginning to wear a little bit thin, to be perfectly honest, and I was wondering how or if I could stop this. And then a plan formulated. When I got home that day, I asked if I could use the typewriter. I put paper in and wound it round and began to type. I thought I'd teach him a lesson that he wouldn't forget. Once I completed the paper, I folded it and put it in an envelope with his name and address on, steamed a used stamp from a letter that we had on the side, and stuck that on the envelope so that it would look like the real thing. I then got up early that Saturday morning and posted it through his door, and went home and had a big smile on my face, thinking about my well-deserved revenge. That afternoon, there was a knock on my door, and it was him, holding the said letter, with an even bigger smile on his face. I was shocked, as I thought I'd been busted and someone had spotted me posting it through his letterbox. But he handed me the letter and said that he'd received this morning from the Admiralty in Portsmouth. And when he showed his mum and dad, they cried and told him they were so proud. At this point, my stomach turned, as I thought he might fall for the letter. But as soon as grown-ups would read it, I thought he would fall the letter, but as soon as grown-ups would read it, they would realise that it was a fake. Anyway, although I knew what it said, I read it. The letter was presented as follows. The Admiralty, Portsmouth, England. Dear Sam, I'm writing to inform you that last week we sent talent scouts to the Northamptonshire branch of Sea Cadets. They were looking for the best of the best, and you stood out as the best Sea Cadet they had ever seen, and the cadet instructors agreed. Because of this, we'll be sending you on a 6-week officer training course.
What?
Once you complete this, you will have a guaranteed position in the Navy and go straight in as a captain at the age of 16.
What?
The rest of the letter went on as follows. Once in the Navy, you will be an officer serving on the HMS Titanic under Captain Napoleon. You'll travel the world, go to lovely places like Siberia, Libya and Argentina. Back then, they were in the news a lot.
Yes.
Eventually, you'll have your own battleship. We look forward to seeing you. For further information, contact Admiral Nelson. I read it and handed it back. Handed it back to him and I said, well done, wondering how his parents couldn't see that the second half of the letter was completely joke-filled. He ignored that and with his grin started telling me once again that he was going places and how my life would be rubbish. Strangely enough, Father Simon, he never knocked on my door again. And when I did see him, he never mentioned a word. I also found out that he left the Sea Cadets quite suddenly. I can only imagine the instructors' faces when he showed them the letter, and he was going to be serving on the Titanic under Napoleon. I imagine this would have been talked about in the pub for years. I'm not asking for forgiveness, as he was horrible to me, and all I wanted was to make a new friend. But I do ask forgiveness to his mum and dad who read the letter and believed their son would one day be the head of the Royal Navy or something like that. Well, we often get confessions where people have faked a letter or something like that, and they're usually a little bit cruel and a bit unfortunate and not very funny. But I did like the idea of the fact he's clearly made it very clear that this is not a real letter. If you're going to be serving on the Titanic under Captain Napoleon, please contact Admiral Nelson. I think all the signs are there. Sister Suze, what do you say to Sinbad?
Well, Sinbad, I do, very creative. And yes, I think, you made it very clear that it wasn't real with the Titanic and Napoleon. And I just feel like he sounds a bit mean. And why couldn't he just be friends with you? And who knows what they want to do at 13? Nobody. And they shouldn't have to either. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive him.
Oh, very good.
Wow.
Brother Matthew.
Well, I'm also going to forgive for very similar reasons, really. I mean, there were plenty of clues there. Clearly, Sam is a bit thick. Also, Sam's parents, a bit thick. Didn't quite understand all the many clues that told them that this letter was, in fact, a fake and that their son was not being talent scouted to have his own boat by the time he was 13. Ridiculous. Yes, definitely forgiven. All aboard.
Okay, very good. Well, it looks as though it's going to be forgiveness all round, I suspect, for Sinbad, but it's entirely down to you on the people's verdict. 61054. First word is Simon. Sort out their confession then, because just before 6, a tale from Sinbad. He'd moved to a new area, age 13, but plagued by annoying, scorn-filled Sam, who kept saying he was going to have a great career in the Navy, whereas Sinbad would amount to nothing. So Sinbad faked a letter from the Admiralty, which announced that Sam would be a captain at 16. He'd serve on the HMS Titanic under Captain Napoleon. He just had to contact Admiral Nelson and so on.
Yeah.
I think it was an obvious fake, but it fooled Sam and his parents. People's verdict. Here we go.
Everyone's forgiving. Yasmin in Birmingham, you have to forgive this. Sam sounded like an arrogant nightmare, boasting to everyone about how great he was. The letter was exactly what he needed to bring him down a peg or two. Dave in Horncastle, definitely forgiven. I'm having a big chuckle in the garden. And Scott in Glasgow, I'd not just like to forgive Sinbad, but also have it arranged for him to have his very own ship as a reward for teaching that horrible boy a lesson in modesty and staying humble.
Thank you for the verdicts and thank you for all the confessions. If you fancy being included, getting a smart speaker and being on the podcast and being on the air, you send your tale, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. What we need is something from the drinks trolley. Let's see if Suze is wheeling it in. Pick us something rather tasty, please, Suze.
Well, I thought you'd like this one. How about a Katy Perry cider?
No, thanks. Okay.
Oh, right.
It's Katy apples and Perry pears from Purbeck Cider Company in Dorset. It's very, very delicious. 5.5%.
I'm sure it's a very good thing. If that's your thing.
Yeah, it is.
Today's confession comes from Nigel. Thanks, Nige. Dear forgiving Father Simon and your studio minions of Muppetry.
Oh.
My confession dates back to 1968 when I was a 10-year-old pupil at St Custard's County Primary School.
Mm-hmm.
The school had arranged a week-long educational trip to Paris for 30 pupils and 3 teachers. We spent weeks preparing assiduously for this by learning off by heart the tunes and all the words of Sur le Pont d'Avignon and Frère Jacques.
Yes.
To venture into the great abroad, we had to obtain visitors' passports, which were a 3-folded card document issued by the post office, who wrote your details inside in biro, glued a photo in and put an official stamp on it. Different times. Ferry tickets were booked, luggage packed. Our excitement was mounting to fever pitch as the departure date grew near. Unfortunately, as you may remember, in the early summer of 1968, there was a sudden outbreak of serious rioting in Paris, because they do that kind of thing, started by students at the Sorbonne, which then spread nationwide. Us 10-year-olds thought this sounded terrifically exciting and rather exotic. We couldn't wait to see our first real-life French riot. But for some reason, our teachers didn't see it quite like that.
No.
Anyway, hasty rearrangements were made, and instead of going to Paris, they took us to Belgium. Now, I've got no doubt that Belgium is a very fine country, but much to commend it. But we were devastated that we were being deprived of experiencing our first ever riot, and we're feeling rather deflated and hard done by about the whole thing. To cheer us up, on the ferry journey over to Belgium, the senior teacher, Mr. Simmons, consoled us somewhat with stirring tales of the Battle of Waterloo, which he told us was quite close to where we'd be staying, and we'd be going there tomorrow. This perked us up considerably, and we were enthralled as he regaled us with talks of heads being blown off by cannonballs and other such events suitable for 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Anyway, however, the next morning when we arrived at Waterloo, there was nothing happening and all was quiet. We were not at all impressed, and all we saw was a mouldy old museum. The remainder of the week was taken up with visits to various not very interesting places of interest, with the penultimate day arrived. The final visit was to a champagne vineyard. And if you look at the geography, that does kind of work in Belgium, because there's a big bit of champagne which sticks into Belgium.
Yeah.
So I checked that anyway. Anyway, the teachers seemed to be looking forward to it immensely. At the winery, we were subjected to a seemingly endless walk through vast cellars full of huge racks of champagne bottles covered in thick layers of dust. We were told they were maturing. However, when our tedious bottle tour came to an end, the teachers told us that we could go and play in the site's very well-equipped playground. It was great, had climbing frames and scramble nets and a big pirate ship and everything. We were very happy. Our teachers left us to it as they all went to a special part of the winery where they could sample some of the product. Much later, when they finally came out, they were very happy too. We went back to our hotel and prepared for the journey home. To get back into Britain, we each had to complete a customs declaration form. We were told to write down on the form anything that we had bought, which we would be taking back home with us. At some point during the week, I had spent some of my precious Belgian francs on a toy gun.
Oh, right.
It was a toy pistol which fired little plaster pellets by means of a spring which was cocked as you pulled the trigger. It was great, Father Simon. You could knock over targets with it, and a pellet would sting if it stuck you from anything about 15 feet away. I'd also bought several boxes of pellets and envisaged many happy hours of play ahead. Looking at my customs form, I wasn't quite sure what to do. "Please, sir, what should I write for this?" I asked Mr. Simmons, showing him my plastic gun and boxes of pellets. Now, possibly the champagne sampling was still having an effect, because he said, "Write down 9mm pistol and ammunition."
What?
Which I did. Next day, we returned to Britain on the ferry, and when we came to customs, I duly handed in my declaration form. The customs officer glanced at it, put it on the desk, and turned to take the form from the next pupil in line, when he did a double take. He turned back to the desk. He picked up my form again, scrutinised it very carefully. He looked at me a bit sideways. He looked even harder at Mr. Simmons, who was in charge of our party and was shepherding us all through customs. The customs officer, who fortunately for Simon had a voice like Ray Winston, called to Mr. Simmons, "Oi, you, over here. I want a word with you." Anyway, then they went off into a side room, and all 30 pupils and 2 remaining teachers were left hanging about for 3 hours and 20 minutes. The teachers were worried and were whispering to each other. What could it be about? What had Mr. Simmons done wrong? Well, I had a pretty good idea, but thought I'd probably best keep quiet. Eventually, the customs man released Mr. Simmons, and we were allowed to go home without having our bags emptied or being strip searched or anything. As I think we've determined, those were very definitely different times.
Yes, they were.
The talk of the school for weeks afterwards was, what had Mr. Simmons done to upset the customs? Had he been smuggling champagne? I never mentioned my customs form to anyone, and he never said a word about it to me. So, Father Simon, I do seek forgiveness from Mr. Simmons, even though I'd only written down exactly what he told me. I seek forgiveness from the customs officers, because even though he was paid for being there, and also from my fellow pupils who had to wait for 3 hours and 20 minutes before we could continue our journey. Yours in contrition, Nigel.
Oh, yes.
I mean, foreign trips were very, very different, obviously, back in those days.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of basically Mr. Simmons said this is what to write, and then Nigel being an obliging kind of boy, wrote precisely that. Sister Suze, what do you say to Nigel?
Well, Nigel, I don't know. It kind of got me the wrong side when he called me a muppet at the beginning, I'll be honest. And do you know what? He didn't seem very grateful at all to be on the trip, did he? And I just didn't appreciate any of it. And also, what is going on? Why is there a children's playground in a champagne vineyard?
Why do you think?
I'd like to know which one it was, because that would be good research. But I just think you should have made clear it was a toy. Should have very early on, toy, and you didn't. And I can't forgive you for that, I'm afraid.
Brother Matthew.
Wasted all that time.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I'm going to forgive. I mean, they missed out on the riots in Paris and Belgium, lovely place, but not as much fun.
And they're
really
on the streets again tomorrow. I mean, they're doing it all the time.
Yes, indeed. Well, what did he do wrong, really? I mean, he asked, didn't he? He asked permission. What should I put on the fire? He said, put down 9mm gun and the ammunition, and so he did. And hang on, why didn't this customs officer at no point decided, well, maybe I should just have a look through the bags, given that's what he's written down? Spent 3.5 hours in there with him, didn't ask, can you open your bag? So not a lot of sympathy there. And yes, why not take a primary school on a tour of the Champagne region? That makes no sense at all. So for all those reasons, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Nigel? That's what's at stake here. 61054. First word is Simon. Just before we got to the news at 6 o'clock, we had Tuesday's confession, which came from Nigel about a school trip. We was going to be to France, then it turned out to be Belgium. Then they all went to a winery, which the teachers obviously liked very much. As a result of which, when Nigel showed his 9mm toy pistol and ammunition to his teacher, the teacher said, just say that it's a 9mm gun with ammunition. As a result, they spent a very, very long time in customs. So did Mr. Simmons. And the people's verdict is in. Here we go.
Hannah says not forgiven. They all got stuck at customs for 3 hours. I'd have been fuming. George in Bournemouth, though, says forgiven. As Matt said, why didn't the customs person just check the child's bag? That surely would have solved the problem very quickly. Kevin says not forgiven just because I'm bitter. He went to Belgium on a school trip. I went 20 miles up the road and spent 3 very uncivilized nights in a tent on my school trip.
Okay, well, you just have to take advantage of the situation as it presents itself.
Yes.
And it did really present itself to Kevin. So we'll take your confessions, please, if you have one. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Oh, time for a little bevy before we get stuck into the confession. What are you offering today from the pub?
I'm offering a Beaver ginger cordial, which is very tasty with sparkling water, but also very yummy with hot water for a nice kind of autumnal mulled feeling.
Autumnal mould?
Mould.
Oh, mould. I thought it was
Mould.
autumnal mould. We don't want any of that.
No, thanks.
Like the sound of a ginger cordial. Very nice. Thank you. We'll have a half. Thank you very much. Today's confession comes from Stephanie. Thank you, Steph. Dear Simon and the Holy Collective, I write needing to unburden myself of a sin I committed over 25 years ago, back in the middle noughties, but which recently came back to me as Matt showed off his prowess at bingo calling.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I'm the oldest of 3 children and have 2 smaller sisters, both of whom I've always got on with really well. We're very close, despite there being 11 years between me and my youngest sister. Due to the age difference between me and my youngest sister, I was often asked to help out with family occasions, no more so than one of my sister's birthday parties. Despite being born near Christmas, my parents always wanted to hold a big party for her in the new year. And on this occasion, the party was to be held at our home, and for it to be a very traditional occasion with jelly, ice cream, cake, and lots of party games. My sister and I were put in charge of the party games, so in the days after Christmas, we started to make the preparations. I apologise for the mention of Christmas already.
Yeah.
My youngest sister went to a school near our home, and my parents had asked for all of the other pupils in her class to attend, so there would be about 20 girls and boys in total. The vast majority of my sister's class were wonderful children. They were polite, courteous, and they got on very well with my sister. There was, of course, one hideous brat. Let's call her Gertrude. Dirty Gertie from number 30,
Right.
who was very much the class bully. To all of the parents, she was just a bit boisterous, and she made a point of never misbehaving in front of the teachers or other parents. But as soon as backs were turned, she would do everything to make the other children's lives a misery. On a couple of occasions, I heard my sister complaining about Gertrude when she was particularly upset when she learned that Gertrude was to be invited to her birthday party. It's because my parents thought it would be unkind to not invite the entire class. Oh, the terrible burden of having to invite the entire class. Our preparations for the day complete. The day of the party soon arrived and the children started arriving. All was proceeding smoothly until Gertie made an appearance. She walked into our house and the atmosphere notably changed. She had the air of someone who felt as though she owned the place. She was much bigger than many of the class. She immediately started shoving her way into conversations, being careful, of course, not to upset any of the children in front of their parents, some of whom had stayed to chat to my own parents. She also made a point of scoffing the food and drink which had just been laid out despite it not being time yet.
That's not on.
Bad person. The time for games soon came. Musical chairs, pass the parcel, musical statues, hide and seek, pin the tail on the donkey, and culminating in several rounds of bingo. Everyone was having a wonderful time and all the parents thought things were going very well. However, despite her very best efforts, Gertrude seemed to just miss out on a prize every single time. And this is my confession, Father Simon. My sister and I had planned in a military-style operation. Past the parcel, we made sure that everyone received a lollipop when they unwrapped a layer, except mysteriously Gertrude's didn't appear to have one in it. We knew which layer it was and just had to stop the music at the right time. In musical chairs, the music always seemed to stop when the other child was closest to the chair. In musical statues, Gertrude was the first one out due to my sister releasing our very excitable dog into the room by accident right where Gertrude was standing. During hide and seek, we left Gertrude hiding despite knowing exactly where she was so the rest of us could enjoy jelly and ice cream without her. However, our pièce de résistance came during bingo. In many ways, this was problematic because it was essentially a game of chance. As to the order the balls came out in, we needed some extra special preparation for this. We handed out the cards and began drawing the numbers. All the fours.
44.
Legs.
11.
Two little ducks.
22.
22.
So there you go. Several children got lines quite quickly and were given bags of chocolate coins. But the prize for filling a card was a large box of chocolates and sweets. However hard she tried, Gertrude didn't seem to be able to fill her card. That's because my sister and I had rigged the cards so that certain numbers were omitted from the balls that we were calling. We were careful to ensure that those numbers were only on Gertrude's card and had to hand them out very carefully. At the end of the day, every child went home with either a small or large prize, except for Dirty Gertie from number 30. So I submit myself to your mercy, Father Simon and the collective. My youngest sister left the school a couple of years later. We never heard from Gertie again. I hope that this did not have a lasting effect on her, but I thought it was only right that she got her comeuppance. What a fine phrase that is. I don't seek Gertrude's forgiveness, but I do seek the forgiveness of my younger sister in case Gertrude turned out to be even more horrible when term started in January. I have a feeling Matt will approve of the confession, and so only hope that Susie can be lenient enough to unburden me of my misdemeanor. Now, I am thinking, just because you could hear a few noises coming from Susie,
yes.
I can see Holly shaking her head next door. I feel an atmosphere of sternness coming down from Bristol.
Well, yeah, Stephanie, I understand Gertrude doesn't sound like a very nice person, but it kind of just tips over the edge into just mean to me. I just think that, not going home with anything, every single thing she didn't get a prize, it's just a bit like bullying. You don't bully the bully. I just feel like it's just not very nice. Left a nasty taste in my mouth.
Really?
I'm not going to forgive you, Stephanie,
Okay.
I'm afraid.
What do you say to Stephanie,
Well,
Matthew?
I mean, Gertrude was a bit of a bully, so fighting fire with fire we are there, aren't we? Because turn the tables on Dirty Gertie, which I entirely approve of, and also the amount of planning that's gone into that. With how you managed to do that with the pass the parcel, get it to stop with her on the wrapper, where you know that there's no thingy,
Yes,
lollipop, and doing it with bingo cards as well. That's
Rigging bingo
inspiring.
is
Rigging the
quite
bingo.
difficult.
Dirty Gertie, that should be a bingo call. Dirty Gertie number 30. So for all those reasons, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, so it's basically going to boil down to the people's verdict. Do you forgive Stephanie for taking it out on Gertrude the bully? It's entirely down to you. 61054, first word is Simon. And just before the news, a confession from Stephanie. It's kids' parties, and Gertrude was a bully. She was invited to the party anyway because all the class had to be invited. But the games were rigged, so she didn't win a thing because she was a bully. Anyway, let's see what the people's verdict says.
Stephanie is forgiven, say Jenny and Mel, crafting in the Cotswolds. Gertie sounded horrible, and the sisters were canny to rig the games. But Hannah says not forgiven. I feel sorry for Dirty Gertie. Where were her parents in all of this? Maybe she didn't get enough attention at home and took it out on everyone else. But Sally, listening in Malvern, says, forgiven. I think it was very generous she got an invite to the party. I wasn't wanted at a friend's party, so she deviously put the wrong date. So I missed the party. And I was a very kind person at school.
Could you say that these were enhanced games that they were playing?
Very good.
And
nice crossover there.
It was kind of rigged.
Maybe
rigged.
You could say that.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, just tying it into the sport.
Yes.
Anyway, so your confessions, please. Thank you very much for the verdicts. Send your confessions to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Checking in then with our drinks trolley. What do we have snatched from the lower ranks now?
I've snatched another Fest beer, this time from Verdant Brewing Company, 5.5%. It's an elevated Hell's lager beer, a bit more hoppier than their usual one, and it's very, very tasty to celebrate Oktoberfest.
Right, well, maybe I'll have a half for later if that's okay. But Nigel's going to bring in his own offerings, I think, to go with his lamb chops.
Yeah.
Lots to choose from. So today's tale comes from Ian. I think that's his real name. He says it's okay to share. So, all right, Ian. Simon, Matt, Susie, Holly and the team, I wish to be forgiven for the unanticipated and unfortunate repercussions of my well-intended action following a 10K running event with my wife, which we participated in some 15 years ago. I've been a keen amateur runner for most of my 63 years, participating in the Great North Run and many local charity runs from 10K to half marathons, with some good times under my belt. Whilst forever enthusiastic about running for a good cause, I am less than enthused about entry fees, which are usually quite steep. However, the particular 10K event in question promised a T-shirt of seemingly better quality than the usual offerings that you wouldn't want to get too near a naked flame with, and sported a very attractive design which had already drawn my wife's attention, so much so she had paid the entry fees for both of us quite gladly, so I was a happy lad. It's worth noting at this point that my wife is not a natural runner. By that I mean that she discovered running later in life and views it more of a necessary evil to help keep the middle-age spread at bay. She prepares for a run the way a teenager prepares for chores, with sighs, stalling, and sudden interest in tidying my bedroom.
Yeah.
That said, and to her credit, she seemed very motivated by the event and another opportunity to try to break the elusive 1 hour time barrier, and a nice T-shirt to add to the collection, of course. On the day of the event, we arrived in good time to survey the scene, and we collected our race numbers and chips. That is the chip for timing purposes, not the chips for eating, which is not a good idea particularly.
Don't do that.
I couldn't see my wife in the pack of around 300 runners, but I wasn't concerned, as being of different abilities, we often start at different places in the starting pack, not least because it avoids the potential for divorce, as I'm unable to push the pace, i.e. speed up please, if we don't run together. Off I went, chest out, legs going like bees' wings, showing these younger runners how it's done. I ran well, proud of overtaking many runners, and moved up the field. Before I knew it, the finish line was in sight. Cheered on by a small crowd, I overtook a couple of young lads of around 12 years old, and I beat them by a gnat's whisker, and in a jolly good time, I was very, very pleased. It was then that I saw my wife, and I thought, has she finished already? No, of course not. She was visibly unwell. Something she'd eaten, she said, and was clearly gutted about not being able to participate after all that training. And it was then that I had an idea to cheer her up. We'd paid for entry and the lovely T-shirt, so without saying what I was going to do, I got her to rest and wait for me on the grass, and I headed off to the T-shirt and goodie bag tent. I duly handed back both our chip timers and collected not only the T-shirts, but a medal each and a goodies galore. All the things that go straight in the bin normally, like a space blanket, the latest chemical cocktail sports drink, and a so-called healthy chewy bar that resembles the bottom of a birdcage. Anyway, returning to my wife, her face lit up at the T-shirt and the freebies. I was again a happy lad. few weeks later, when I was out in the front garden, our usual courier pulled up and handed me a small package. Not having my reading glasses to hand, I took the parcel indoors for later inspection and resumed my gardening. A few hours later, I joined my wife in the kitchen and over a cuppa remembered the parcel. Now, just at this point, the phone rings, and whilst asking me what the parcel was, my wife hurries out into the hallway to answer the call because we have a landline. So these two things now happen simultaneously. Me in the kitchen opening the package to find a very ornate engraved silver salver. My wife had in fact been awarded the accolade of fastest senior woman in our recent 10K event and had come second place in the women's category overall. I was astonished. At the same time, my wife in the hallway on the phone, I could hear her saying, "Yes, I'd be delighted to attend a presentation event. Yes, of course I'll talk to the older women about the benefits of running. Oh, a photo magazine? Yes, of course." And then, "What do you mean, fastest senior woman? That can't be right. I didn't actually run." "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll make sure this doesn't happen again. I'm so sorry." And the penny dropped for both of us. I had carried around the 10K course with me, my wife's paraphernalia, which included her chip timer. Both had recorded a race time, which was my race time. The results had been published that same day on the organiser's website, and sure enough, there was my wife's name for all to see. Imagine the sensation. A newcomer, and an older one at that, beating the experienced runners. Well, we had a giggle about it at first, then my wife's conscience got the better of her. She insisted that the salver be returned, and that I should write an apology to the organisers. I did no such thing, of course. But the silver salver did go back. Most astonishingly, because of the admin or something, the organisers never republished the results, and so the whole thing stayed there forever. Anyway, so we need to seek forgiveness from the senior lady runner who legitimately was the fastest senior woman on the day, all the lovely senior ladies who should have moved up a place in the results and whose confidence might have been unwittingly knocked, and my wife for putting her in the embarrassing situation of having to fess up to the organisers and who's had to compete ever since under a false name for fear of being recognised. But Ian is not using a false name, he's using his actual name. Oh, that was particularly fantastic.
Billy boxing gloves, though.
That's the one. I'd just like to show my prowess every now and again. Suze, what do you say to Ian?
Ian, I just think, how did you know? I don't know why she didn't have her chip on her in the first place. Why did you have her chip in the first place? But I feel like I understand your wife. I'm not a natural runner. I wouldn't have liked it. And, no harm done. I'm in a forgiving mood. Okay. I'll let him off.
Brother Matthew.
Yes, I'm going to forgive because, as Sue says, how do the organisers not work out that there's two chips that go around at exactly the same time? That's not going to happen. So surely it's down to the organisers there. Also, I'd have kept the silver salver. In fact, I kept everything really, and I wouldn't have fessed up as his wife did. And I'm sure the other senior lady saw the funny side. So in the words of REM, it's going out to the one I love, and I'm going to forgive.
What?
People's verdict, please. 61054. That made less sense than normal. 61054. Before the news, you had a confession from Ian. Ian and his wife were entered into a 10K run. Ian's wife, unfortunately, wasn't very well, so he ran. I don't think he realised he was running with her chip, the kind of electronic thing that times you. Anyway, the result is she got the award for the fastest senior woman. She handed it back, but online, the results stayed the way they were. The people's verdict, here we go.
Forgiven, says Kat. I blame the system. Why didn't they keep an eye on who legitimately won the medal? Also forgiven, says Nikki in Hampshire. Having inadvertently swapped chips with my husband in a similar race and having therefore placed top 5 in the elite women, I completely forgive. Nice. And Mark in Glasgow says, forgiven, I had a situation where a race had 5 laps. I accidentally only did 4 and ended up getting 4th place.
I think there's a lot of this happening. If that's one of your stories, send your confession, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.